have a male suspect of Puerto Rican and Sicilian descent. He's currently evading. Description includes a beard and extensive tattoos. For some reason, he's rocking a fucking clown.
I was out here in these Brooklyn streets. I felt a pulse in my heart like someone needed me. Then this crazy thought flowed through to me. I felt that maybe I could be a motherfucking king.
I went through a really tough time in my life recently. I'm a teacher. I was at work one day and, normal day. I was out in the schoolyard watching my students. Kid kicked a soccer ball. I moved out of the way very quickly. And my knee buckled. I'm thinking, all right, maybe it's just nothing. Maybe I just hurt my knee, something. I had no idea what it might have been. Try to walk on it, I realized, I can't walk right now. And I went home the next day. I went to the hospital. While I was in the hospital, there were just so many thoughts going through my head. They thought my ACL was torn, so I'm thinking I'm gonna have to have open knee surgery. And I have my whole leg tattooed, so I was like, fuck, I'm gonna ruin my tattoos. I didn't want that to happen at all. But basically, I got a few MRIs done. They referred me to other doctors. And what went from what they thought was an ACL tear actually ended up being tumors in my knee. I have a rare condition called PVNS. And basically what PVNS does is it makes tumors grow on the lining of a joint. For me, it was the lining of my knee joint. There is a very high rate that it will come back, which I'll have to handle if it does. But I recently had surgery. I had open synvectomy, which I actually do have a song on Knee Deep in Beats titled Knee Deep Open Synvectomy.
From the concrete I rose, a scholar in strife. Mastered the art of survival with knowledge as my knife. The darkness still whispers an old haunting tune. Echoes of my past under this cold watchful moon. But I'm the master of my fate, the captain of my soul.
As far as my surgery goes, I went to NYU. I had a great doctor named Dr. Karim Masura, and he cut my knee open. He took out just about 11 inches worth of my joint lining and tumors. And while it sucked and while it was horrible, I got through it, even though I didn't think I was gonna get through it. And what that led me to was making music. Right before surgery, I started doing it. It was just like a hobby. I've written for years. I've written poems, and I've studied these musicians. I've studied their music. Music has always been a really big part of my life since the time I was a kid. Whenever I was going through tough things as a kid, I would always throw on an Eminem album. And I would just sit there and I would bump it. And beginning from those times, I've turned to music for so many things. And, from that moment on, there were so many different artists that I went to their concerts and I was front row for, especially in the underground hip hop scene. And I was at the Action Bronson concert. He was doing his Dr. Baklava and Human Growth Hormone show. I was moved beyond words between Action Bronson just absolutely killing it, Young Mexico ripping it. He had the rest of the band with absolute amazing sound. It was an insane experience. Speaking from the Moon was a song I created to respond to Live from the Moon. I felt that if I'm going to rap and I'm going to be in this game, I had to give a nod to the person that inspired me to do it. So I crafted this song that's going to be on my upcoming album, Knee Deep in Beats, and that song represents how I was moved by Action Bronson. I went to those shows and my house had burned down. I had nothing in that moment. I was distraught. I decided to go all the way to Bleecker Street and go to these shows and just let myself be enveloped in the music. Brooklyn in itself is legendary, and it was really just a place that turned me into who I was as a whole. Artistically, I was influenced by everything around me. Growing up, I grew up a Puerto Rican Italian kid. In most crowds, I was too Italian for the Puerto Ricans, and I was too Puerto Rican for the Italians. So, there was a lot of times in my life where it was lonely for me, and I felt like I couldn't fit in. Because, I grew up in an area where it was very you're either this or you're that. At the end of the day, I took all of that and I used it to think about how I could impact others that feel like that. Because there are so many people that feel like that. We live in a giant city. And in this giant city, unfortunately, there are a lot of schools, there are a lot of places where you see these cliquey groups. And, if you don't fit in with them, then you're not one of them. And that could be tough on somebody. And not everybody can handle that loneliness. If I could use my music to help people see that you don't need to be lonely in this world, then so be it.
I'm just not willing to give up on my dreams. I'm gonna see this shit through.
So South Brooklyn was a song I wanted to write to really like give people an intro to my story. South Brooklyn talks about what I went through growing up. You know, one of the most pivotal things I speak about in that song is 12 guns being pointed at me by 12 cops when I was 12 years old. And that was a really tough moment for me, and it transformed me as a person. So basically there was one day where I had a small incident on 18th Avenue with my mother. I got back to my house. I was being an angry kid, nothing out of the ordinary. I went into my apartment and I locked the door. I wanted to be alone. My mom got home and I didn't want to open the door for her, and basically that led to another family member calling the cops on me, and it impacted me in a really negative way in the moment because, you know, I was scared. I was a 12-year-old kid. I saw 12 cops coming up the stairs. They had their guns out at me. I didn't know if I was going to end up on the front page of a newspaper or anything like that. It was a scary moment, especially with the fact that my dad's in jail, and my dad has literally been in jail my whole life. So that was a scary moment for me. But I feel that regardless of it being a scary moment, I was able to build from that, because even if my dad spent his whole life in jail, and even if I knew that was a life I never wanted to be a part of, and I never was going towards that life, but just having a moment like that just impacted me so much, because I saw that even if you aren't a bad person, something bad can happen to you if you end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But, you know, having my dad in jail my whole life, like, that impacted me. I would sit there in my room sometimes and, like, I would look outside of the window and I'd see my friends' dads and I'd be like, damn, like, I wish I had a dad, you know? So, like, it was hard not having him around. And, you know, I used that to really just learn, you know, years. I spent years talking to my dad over a phone. I never had that father to son contact. I never had that father figure to be like, all right, son, like, this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to teach you this. I'm going to teach you that. I didn't learn none of those things. I grew up with all women around me aside from my uncle. Like, having my dad in jail, it really did suck. There was one moment that was amazing to me, though. I got the opportunity to work on a PBS documentary. When my father was in jail, he decided to go and get his bachelor's degree, which I thought was dope as hell, because you could easily sit in your cell for 20 years, 25, 30, however long you're in prison, and you could do nothing. But he chose to sit there and, like, you know, try to get himself set up so when he was released, he'd have, you know, his feet on the ground and he'd have that education. He's a smart man, so he bodied that program. But while he was doing it, he actually had, the group of them had someone approach them, and that person was Lynn Novick. She worked with PBS, and they put out the PBS documentary College Behind Bars, directed by Ken Burns. And I actually had the opportunity to be in that. I have a scene in the second episode, me and my father and my sister, where we talk a little bit about his journey. And, you know, like, things like that have led me to, you know, really being passionate about prison reform. I want to see change in this country. I want to see people being given opportunities to better themselves when you're in a cell, because at the end of the day, just because you're locked up in a cell doesn't mean that you're not a person, and it doesn't mean that we should have our prison systems focused on treating people like animals instead of rehabilitating people, because that's the only way we'll ever see our world grow, by rehabilitating the people that do wrong in this world and showing them the ways to do right. And a program like the Bard College Initiative is amazing for that, because you give people an opportunity for free college education. A lot of these people would have never even had that opportunity. So, you know, that's made me very passionate for prison reform. And, you know, going back to, like, another part of my younger days, coming out to Long Island has always been one of my favorite things to do. And growing up, my uncle was the most amazing person to me. He was really my dad, you know, in a world where I wasn't blessed to have a father growing up. He's the person who stood up, and he's the person who took that role on for me, and I could never appreciate him more for that. When he left, it was one of the hardest moments of my life, and, you know, seeing how that impacted my family, seeing how much of a light he truly had on this world, it resonated in my soul more than anything else I've ever experienced in this life. And, you know, I like to think back to this one night where I had gotten my master's degree, and, you know, he came home from work, he brought me this bottle of tequila right there, and, you know, we drank some of it. He wanted me to drink more, but I didn't drink with him, and I wish I would have, because that was the last thing he got from me. But, you know, that same day we had a conversation, and I had turned to him and I said, Uncle, I wish you and Aunt Dina would have had another kid and had a son. And he turned to me and he told me, I never needed a son, I had you. And, you know, moments like that, they're in here, you know. So when I crafted the song Please Don't Leave, I was thinking of him right in my head the whole time. I was thinking of my mother's sickness, how my uncle responded to my mother's sickness, and like being able to write a song like that, and that being my first song that I ever really sat down and worked hard to write, is so special to me, because I'm doing all this not only for me, but for my uncle, for Jack, for all my people in heaven that aren't here. Even with the song Almost Sinatra, I'm talking about my grandfather's life, because he was almost Frank Sinatra, and if life would have went differently, there's a chance that he could have really been a well-known name like that. But regardless of that, my grandfather persevered. He had the Rainbow Orchestra in Brooklyn. His name was known. There's still people in that neighborhood that know him. So a song like Almost Sinatra means the world to me, because it allows me to tell my grandfather's story, and it allows me to share a little piece of my grandfather's amazing voice with the whole world. But as a whole, right here where I am, this is what transformed me as a man, being with my uncle, learning from him. He's the reason why I wanted to play football. He's the reason why I wanted to start listening to different types of music. He's the person who got me into rap. We would be sitting in the back of the car, and he'd be blasting music to the point where me and my cousin Felicia would be shaking. And I love that, and that's how I play my music now. And even his music taste, a lot of my music taste is influenced by him. I remember back a few years ago, he had the song Click as his ringtone, and he would sing it and rap it every single time it came on. Now I do similar shit, so I'm always thinking about my uncle, and every step I'll always take for the rest of my life while I'm on this planet will always be with my uncle in mind, and it'll also be with Jack in mind. And fortunately, my mother was given another chance at life with a kidney transplant, so there was one happy ending from Please Don't Leave, but the other two, even if they weren't happy endings, it's my job and it's my role on this planet to carry them with me every single place I go for the rest of my life. When I was crafting Knee Deep in Beats, I decided that I wanted to come out with a song to represent Thailand, which is what Golden Temples talks about. It talks about my experience out there. And it was such a great experience that I come to places like this so I could give back still. My time out there honestly was the most beautiful experience of my life. I got tattooed in a 700-year-old temple by a monk. I walked with tigers, I swam with elephants, I rode up mountains to temples. As a whole, it was just one of the most beautiful moments that I've ever had in my life. So for my tattoo, I went to this temple called Wat Sung Tabaran, and I had Abet tattoo me, and he actually, the first time I went, he tattooed me, and he gave me something called the Hai Taud, which is 5 lines of basically white magic. It's a language that dates back to over 1,000 years ago. And he was actually chanting as he was tattooing me, and it was all like stick and poke, which it was just absolutely amazing. I have so many tattoos, but that tattoo in specific was great. And then he actually invited me back to the temple because he found out that I was teaching monks English out there. So he invited me back, and he gave me a second one, which was a crocodile that he put right above my belly button, which is honestly my favorite tattoo. One of the best moments actually that I had out there, my uncle and my grandfather's favorite song was My Way by Frank Sinatra. My grandfather actually sang that song on his deathbed, which I used a sample of on my song Almost Sinatra. And I was walking, and I was just taking a video of the night market, and I was just recording the vendors and everything just to send people back home. And as I kept walking, there was a violinist, and I loved the violin. So I walked up to him, and I was recording him, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what is this song right now? And why do I know this? And then I realized the harmony he was playing, and it was My Way by Frank Sinatra. And in that moment, I broke down, but I was also happy because it was I was across the world, and I knew I had my uncle and my grandfather both with me in that moment. Thailand was so spiritual for me. If I ever had any doubt in me, which I never really did, that there wasn't a God, then that would have been the one thing that proved to me that there was a God, because I saw God everywhere out there. I actually also, while I was teaching, the monks took me to the abbot of the temple, and we did a ceremony for my uncle. They basically do a ceremony of merit in Thailand. And what they basically have you do is they have you go in front of the monk, you bring offerings of food that your deceased one would like to eat, and you bring some water. And what you do is basically you kneel down in front of the abbot, and you give him the name. And he starts chanting the name, and he goes from there into sprinkling water over you and oil over you. And then what you do is he hands you an empty gold cup, and the empty cup represents the emptiness of the world when your loved one leaves. But the water's in all of us. Water is what we're made of. So when you put that water into the cup, it represents filling up the deceased family member with all the love that's still here on earth with them. So basically, I filled that cup up. I heard him chanting my uncle's name, which was amazing. And we walked over to a tree, and that's what you do. You pour it onto a tree. So you put it basically back into the earth. The spiritual aspect of Thailand was undefeated. I've never felt anything compared to that, because there has never been anything like that in my life aside from Thailand. When I went to Thailand, I did it as a part of the Friends for Asia program. And I actually went out there all by myself. I didn't know anybody, but I met some amazing people out there. In specific, one of the people that mattered most and became a best friend to me very, very quickly was this kid named Jack. He was from London. I never became so close with somebody so quickly. And we connected on music, actually. And Jack was an awesome dude. And he was out in Thailand as well. He was doing the journalist program. You know, I walked in the house the first day. I was real nervous because I was in Asia. I was on the other side of the world, but all by myself. And I remember I walked in, he was wearing this Derrick Rose jersey. And he walked up to me and he dapped me up. He said, "What's up, bro?" in his super, super British accent. So it wasn't bro, it was bruv. He dapped me up, and like, you know, from that moment on, like, we were boys. And, you know, like we became basically inseparable while we were out in Thailand. You know, we had this one night where we just spent the whole night listening to underground rap music. You know, I showed him like a bunch of Hobson songs, a bunch of Action Bronson songs. He showed me Dave, which is, Dave's a very popular UK rapper. So basically, Jack ended up unfortunately passing away. And he passed away this past July. So me and Jack, while our friendship wasn't that long, you know, like it's like we had memories that lasted a lifetime. You know, like we went ziplining when we were out in Thailand. We literally sat there and we like rode through the entire Thai jungle, smoking joints, like listening to Kanye albums. Like, it was amazing. And, you know, I look back at those moments and like I appreciate them so much. And, you know, without going into too much detail on how Jack's life unfortunately ended, the song Psycho by Dave represents a big part of, you know, how his life ended. And that song, when he initially went missing, was the first song that showed up on the shuffle when I played Dave, because I wanted to play, you know, one of the dudes he liked. And I looked under my Spotify playlist and, you know, I saw Dave and I saw the song Psycho right underneath it. And, you know, like that, I cried in that moment, you know, because it's like a piece of him is with me. So, you know, my goal right now is to just work my ass off and get known in the UK as well. It's not just about America, because I want to go out to London eventually, and my goal is to do a show, you know, for him. And I want to give all that money towards suicide prevention and towards, you know, something that can make a difference in this world, so that there'll never be another soul like Jack's that has to take his own life. So while Knee Deep in Beats is my first album, it's only the beginning for me. It's an album that represents this part of my life, but I have so much more of a story to tell, and this is just the beginning. And I know that I really want to target the UK, and I want to go out to the UK. I want to go out to London, and like I said, I want to do that show for my boy Jack, and I want to see his family in the front row, and I want to sing that song and have them hear their son being immortalized, because that's what I want to do. You know, it's my job, and it's what Jack would want me to do. The main thing I want people to take away from both this documentary and my music is, you can take pain, you could turn it into pleasure. You can take the darkness and you could turn it into light. All change takes is putting a thought in our mind and moving towards it. You know, it would have been very easy for me to have my knee surgery, stay on my couch, keep watching anime, smoking weed all day, eating Chinese food. But I wanted more. You know, so what I want people to take away from this is that if you want change in your life, all you got to do is go towards it.
Push forward! My soldiers scream out!